That day, inside the East Wing, the walls seemed to hold their breath. Aides moved carefully, for the inevitable storm when the door to the First Lady's private office shut. The sound was sharp enough to make even a Secret Service agent look up. Everyone knew what was coming, but no one dared to predict how far it would go. Melania was seated behind a polished mahogany desk, a glass of water untouched at her side. The leaked DNA report lay in front of her, its pages slightly bent from being gripped too tightly. Her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from fury. She had spent years mastering the art of silence, keeping her emotions tucked neatly away from the public eye. But this was different. This was about Barron. "I will not allow them to destroy my son," she snapped, her accent cutting through the tension like a knife. "Do you understand? I don't care what it takes." Across from her, two advisors shifted uneasily. One, a political strategist named Raymond Hull, cleared his throat and tried to sound steady. "First Lady, we can manage this. These things, rumors, leaks, they come and go. What matters is getting ahead of it." Before what? She shot back, slamming her hand down on the desk. The sound echoed in the room. "Before every paper in the country prints lies about my family. Before my son becomes a target." Her voice cracked with a mix of rage and something else, fear. The room fell quiet. Even Hull, who had handled crises for decades, didn't have an immediate answer. It wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about bloodlines, about identity, about something too sensitive to be explained away with spin. Melania stood suddenly, pushing her chair back with such force that it rattled against the wall. She began pacing, her heels striking the marble floor like a metronome of fury. "I gave everything for this role," she muttered, more to herself than to her team. "I protected. I stayed silent. I smiled when I wanted to scream. And this is how they repay me." One aide, a younger woman named Charlotte Winslow, dared to speak. "Ma'am, we're not sure who leaked it, but if we can trace it back, find them. I don't care how. I don't care what you have to do. I want to know who betrayed me." The demand wasn't unreasonable for Washington, but the way she said it, low, sharp, and absolute, made everyone in the room stiffen. Charlotte scribbled a note, her hands shaking slightly before slipping out of the office to begin calls. That left Hull, who knew better than to push too hard when the First Lady was in this state. Still, his job was to advise, and he leaned forward carefully. "We have options. We can discredit the report. We can call it fabricated, tie it to political enemies, or we can delay, say nothing, and let it fade." Melania's laughter was bitter. "Hollow, fade. Nothing fades here. Everything becomes permanent. They will use this to destroy him, and to destroy me." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I will not let them." For a moment she looked almost fragile, eyes glassy, her hands gripping the back of the chair she had abandoned. But then she straightened, wiping away any trace of vulnerability. The mask was back. "Prepare statements," she ordered, "but no one breathes a word until I approve it. Not a single sentence leaves this office." Hull nodded, but he knew what Melania didn't. Secrecy never lasts in Washington. The harder you clamp down, the more others pry. And somewhere he suspected someone already had copies of the report. The outburst didn't end with words. Later that night, staffers described hearing the sound of glass shattering from the private residence of this maybe throne. In a moment of rage, no one dared to ask. They just knew that the First Lady had crossed a line she rarely allowed herself to reach. Losing composure, and as word trickled out, aides shared hushed accounts with trusted contacts. "She's furious," one said over the phone to a colleague at the Eisenhower Executive Office building. "I've never seen her like this. If anyone thinks she'll sit quietly, they're wrong." Those whispers became part of the story themselves, adding fuel to the fire. It wasn't just the DNA results anymore. It was Melania's explosive reaction, proof that the leak had struck deeper than anyone imagined. But rage alone couldn't bury a leak, especially when someone else in Washington was already preparing to make it public. The morning after Melania's furious eruption, Washington's air felt heavier. A motorcade slipped quietly down Pennsylvania Avenue, not for a state event, but for a private meeting at a law office tucked between coffee shops in downtown D.C. The people inside weren't wearing flags on their lapels or speaking in patriotic tone. They were lawyers, crisis managers, and spin doctors brought together for one reason: to bury the DNA leak. At the center of it sat Raymond Hall, Melania's most trusted strategist, and two attorneys from a firm known for handling political disasters behind closed doors. The folder with the leaked results rested on the polished conference table, and everyone stared at it like it was a live grenade. "We've got two options," one lawyer said flatly. "Discredit or destroy. We can call this a fabrication, link it to political opponents, maybe even suggest it's part of a smear campaign against the First Lady." Or what Hole interrupted, "Already tired of half measures, or we bury it under something bigger." The lawyer continued, adjusting his tie. "Another story, another controversy. Washington forgets quickly when you give it something else to chase." Hull rubbed his temple. He knew the mechanics well. Distractions worked, but timing mattered. If they played the wrong card too early, it would look forced. If they waited, the leak could grow into a wildfire. And hanging over all of it was Melania herself, angry, wounded, and unwilling to accept anything less than total erasure. Back at the White House, Charlotte Winslow returned with troubling news. She had spent hours calling contacts, trying to trace the origin of the leak. Some said it came from within the medical community. Others whispered it had slipped through a staffer with access to private records. No matter the trail, it ended the same way. Someone wanted this out, and they had been careful. Melania paced the resident's phone, pressed to her ear as Hull briefed her from the meeting. "Downtown, they're telling me we can bury it," he said, his voice measured. "But they'll need time and resources." "Time we don't have," Melania snapped. "By now half the city knows if Jasmine Crockett gets her hands on this." She stopped, biting down the rest of her sentence. Just the thought of the outspoken congresswoman holding this kind of weapon made her chest to tighten. Charlotte entered cautiously, holding a notepad. "Ma'am, there's already chatter online, small accounts, nothing major yet, but people are asking questions." Melania's face hardened. "Shut it down." "How?" Charlotte asked softly. "Call platforms, call editors, call whoever you must. I don't care if it takes threats or favors. No one repeats this." The room fell silent again. Even for Washington, where spin was currency, this was a tall order. Trying to silence an entire city was like trying to hold back the PTO Act with your hand. Later that evening, Hall gathered the crisis team again. They ran through scenarios, each one more desperate than the last. Fake leaks to muddy the waters, quiet bribes to journalists, pressure on social media companies to flag misinformation. Each idea carried risk. One advisor leaned forward, speaking in a low voice. "The real danger isn't the report itself. It's the reaction. If people see how badly the First Lady wants this buried, they'll assume the worst. We need to make her look calm, controlled above it all. Not angry, not desperate." Hall exhaled slowly, easier said than done. Meanwhile, word of Melania's fury was spreading faster than the DNA rumor itself. Staffers talked, reporters listened. The phrase "explosive outburst" began appearing in private text exchanges between journalists, waiting for someone bold enough to put it in print. In Dallas, Texas, a reporter named Lyle Morgan sat at his desk staring at an email from a trusted source. Attached was a scan of what looked like the DNA report. He wasn't the only one who had it, but he was one of the few willing to verify it before publishing. He made a call to a congressional staffer he trusted. "Have you heard what's happening in the East Wing?" he asked. The staffer's reply was short. "She's panicking. If you have something, you should run it." Morgan leaned back in his chair, torn between caution and ambition. If he went forward, the story would explode nationally. If he held it, someone else would beat him to it. While Morgan debated, Jasmine Crockett was already watching the developments closely from her office in Dallas. She spoke with her aides about the chatter, her sharp eyes narrowing as she read through a set of forwarded emails. "This isn't just about a family issue," she said calmly. "This is about transparency, about what they hide and why." Her staff exchanged glances, recognizing that tone. Crockett had found her opening, but before she could make her move, Melania's team was preparing a counter-narrative, that would test just how much control the First Lady really had. Jasmine Crockett wasn't the type to tiptoe around a scandal. She had built her reputation on speaking boldly, cutting through the noise, and saying what others were too afraid to say out loud. So, when word of Barron's DNA leak reached her desk, she didn't just raise an eyebrow, she leaned in. Her staffers had gathered in a small conference room in Dallas, laptops open, coffee cups scattered, and a whiteboard filled with names, dates, and arrows that looked like the makings of a political thriller. Jasmine stood at the front, hands on her hips, her expression sharp. "All right," she said, her voice steady but charged. "Tell me what we know. Don't give me fluff. I want the real trail." Her aide, Marcus Bellamy, tall, sharp-minded, and quick with research, clicked to the first slide on the projector. The document first appeared in a secure email thread between medical staffers. Someone forwarded it. "We can't tell who yet, but it spread fast after that. At least 3 reporters have copies, but no one's gone public." "Why?" Jasmine asked. "They're scared," Marcus replied. "If they print it, the First Lady's legal team comes down hard. It's easier to sit on it." Jasmine smirked. "Scared? That's not journalism. That's babysitting power." The room chuckled nervously. They knew when Jasmine was in this mood, the conversation would cut like a knife. Another staffer, Lino Ortiz, spoke up. "We also heard Melania's been volatile, shouting at staff, making threats. People are calling it the worst meltdown since she entered the White House." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "Volatile? That's not a headline, that's a symptom. If she's reacting that way, it means this leak cuts deeper than they want anyone to know." She leaned closer to the table, her voice dropping. "And if it's that personal, they'll do anything to bury it." The team exchanged looks. They knew where this was going. Jasmine Crockett wasn't going to sit back. She was going to move. She picked up her phone, dialing a number without hesitation. On the other end, a journalist she trusted answered, his tone cautious. "Congresswoman, I heard you've been sniffing around the DNA story." "Not so much." "You heard right," she replied, pacing slowly as she spoke. "Tell me what you know off the record." The journalist hesitated. "I've seen the document, haven't published. Too risky." "Risky for who?" Jasmine pressed. "For you, for your paper, or for the truth?" Silence stretched for a moment before he sighed. "The First Lady's people are already circling. They'll tear anyone apart who touches it." Jasmine didn't blink. "Then let them come for me. I don't scare easy." She hung up and turned back to her team. "Here's what we do. We don't touch Barron. That's off limits. The story isn't about him. It's about her. It's about the secrecy, the cover-up, the lengths they'll go to protect an image, while demanding silence from everyone else." Marcus nodded. "So, you're planning a public statement, not just a statement," Jasmine said, her tone electric. "We're going to set the frame. We're going to talk about what happens when leaders hide behind walls of power. We're going to show the people that truth doesn't belong to politicians. It belongs to them." That night, Jasmine drafted her first remarks, short, sharp, impossible to ignore. The next morning, standing outside her Dallas office, microphones clustered around her, she delivered them with calm precision. "Secrecy is the currency of the powerful," she began. "When documents leak, when people speak out, it's not chaos, it's democracy at work. And when those in the highest positions scramble to bury the truth, we should all be asking, what are they afraid of us knowing?" Reporters leaned forward, recording every word. She didn't mention Barron, she didn't even mention Melania by name. But the implication was crystal clear. One journalist shouted, "Congresswoman Crockett, are you saying the First Lady is covering something up?" Jasmine's eyes locked onto his. "I'm saying this. If the truth makes someone uncomfortable, that's their problem, not the people's suck." Meanwhile, in the East Wing, Melania's team scrambled. Hall called an emergency meeting, his face pale as he showed her the clip. "She's careful, but she's aiming right at us. She's framing this as a moral fight." Melania's jaw tightened. "Then we fight back harder." But Jasmine wasn't just talking. She was preparing to put evidence on the table. The kind of evidence that would make silence impossible. The air inside the Rayburn House office building carried a different weight that morning. Cameras lined the hallway. Reporters elbowed each other for position, and staffers whispered with a kind of intensity that signaled something bigger than politics was about to unfold. Jasmine Crockett was scheduled to speak at a subcommittee hearing, but everyone knew this wasn't going to be just another routine session. Jasmine walked into the chamber with her usual calm stride, papers tucked neatly in her hands. She wore no theatrics on her face, just focused, yet every step drew eyes. She wasn't simply attending a hearing. She was staging a confrontation that could change the conversation in Washington. On the other side of the city, Melania's team sat glued to screens. Holt leaned forward, in his chair at the White House communications office, sweat beating at his temple. "If she goes straight for it, we're in trouble," he muttered. Melania sat stiffly beside him, her arms crossed, her eyes locked on the screen. She had been briefed repeatedly that Jasmine wouldn't mention Barron by name. That was the red line. But the problem was clear. She didn't need to. The hearing opened with formalities, but the energy shifted when it was Jasmine's turn to speak. She adjusted the microphone, scanning the room with deliberate patience before beginning. "America doesn't just run on laws, it runs on trust," she said, her voice steady. "And when those in power treat truth like it's optional, that trust dies a little every day." Her words cut through the silence. The members of the committee shifted in their seats. Sensing where she was heading, reporters at the back of the room leaned forward, pens poised. Jasmine continued, her tone sharpening. "We have seen time and time again. Leaders demand loyalty, demand silence, demand that we look away when the truth becomes inconvenient. But democracy doesn't work when secrecy becomes the default. The American people deserve better." One congressman interjected, trying to steer her back to the official agenda. "Congresswoman Crockett, we're here today to discuss transparency in government contracts." She didn't flinch. "Exactly," Jasmine replied, locking eyes with him. "Transparency is the issue. And whether it's contracts, classified documents, or private reports being hidden to protect political families, the pattern is the same. Cover it up, silence dissent, and hope no one asked questions." The room erupted in murmurs. Everyone knew what she was alluding to. She had drawn the line without crossing it, pointing directly at the White House, while leaving just enough space for deniability. Cameras zoomed in on her face as she pulled out a sheet of paper, not the DNA report itself, but something damning enough. A timeline of communications showing how quickly the First Lady's office had moved to shut down chatter after the leak. "Within 48 hours of this report circulating," Jasmine said, tapping the paper for emphasis, "calls were made to media outlets, editors were pressured, and platforms were leaned on to silence discussion. If the report were meaningless, if it were fabricated, why scramble so hard to bury it?" Gasps filled the room. It wasn't about Barron anymore. It was about power and control. A reporter shouted from the back, breaking decorum, "Congresswoman, are you accusing the First Lady of using her office to suppress information?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "I'm saying the calls came from people under her authority. Whether she picked up the phone herself or gave the order behind closed doors, the result is the same. Suppression of truth." In that moment, the room went still. It was the quote every network would replay by evening. Back at the White House, Holt slammed his fist on the table. "She's reckless. She just accused the First Lady of abusing her office." Melania sat stiffly, her jaw clenched, her nails digging into the armrest of her chair. "Then we sue her for defamation." Holt hesitated. "That would make it worse. The moment we file, the documents become evidence. She wants us to overreact." Charlotte added quietly, "The optics of suing a congresswoman for demanding transparency could destroy us." Melania's face flushed with anger, but she said nothing. Meanwhile, in the press room, Jasmine doubled down again. She leaned closer to the microphone, lowering her voice, so every word landed like a blow. "Every parent wants to protect their child. I respect that. But no parent, no spouse, no official has the right to weaponize silence, to protect their own image while punishing the people for asking questions. We deserve leaders who answer, not leaders who hide." The reporters broke into a frenzy, shouting questions as Jasmine stepped away from the podium. She didn't look back. Her statement had been delivered like a hammer striking steel. Loud, sharp, impossible to ignore. That night, anchors across the country dissected her words. Pundits argued fiercely. Was she brave or reckless? A truth teller or an opportunist? But even those who disliked her admitted one thing. She had forced the First Lady into a corner. At a bar in Phoenix, A young couple watched the news replay on a mounted television. The man shook his head, muttering, "If she's lying, why does she sound so damn convincing?" His partner sipped her drink slowly, maybe because she isn't crossed the country. Conversations like that rippled into the early hours. Jasmine's gamble had paid off. At least for now, she had shifted the spotlight back onto Melania, away from the sympathy card, and directly onto questions of power. But the deeper Jasmine pushed, the more dangerous the game became. For if Melania lashed back, the fight could move from words to something far harsher. Washington thrives on scandal, but this one had its own gravity. By the time Jasmine Crockett's press conference replayed on every major network, lawmakers across the Hill were already choosing sides. Some whispered their support behind closed doors, praising her courage. Others shook their heads, warning that she had crossed the line. No one dared before, pointing directly at the First Lady. The morning after, the atmosphere in Congress was electric. Reporters swarmed the steps of the Capitol, thrusting microphones into the faces of any member willing to comment. Some dodged, some fumbled. A few, like Senator Howard Briggs from Ohio, went on record. "I think Congresswoman Crockett is asking the right questions," Briggs told camera, his tie slightly crooked as he pushed through the crowd. "The American people deserve transparency, even from the highest offices, especially from them." The quote ran on a loop through the day, fueling headlines. Division grows in Congress over Crockett's claim. Meanwhile, inside committee rooms, staffers argued in hushed voices about whether a formal inquiry could be justified. Officially, nothing had been filed. Unofficially, people were already digging, looking into communications, tracing calls, asking if taxpayer resources had been used in Melania's push to silence the press. At the White House, the fallout was just as fierce. Holt briefed Melania in the residence, his tone sharper than usual. "We're being boxed in. Congress is sniffing around. Journalists are quoting Crockett word for word. The more we push, the more this looks like guilt." Melania paced the room, her heels clapping against the polished floor. "So we do nothing. We let her insult me, humiliate my family." Charlotte spoke softly from the corner. "If we overplay, we confirm her story. The best option may be patience. Let the noise drown itself." Melania stopped pacing, her eyes burning. "Patience is weakness. If I look weak, I lose. I will not lose." Elsewhere, cable news panels lit up with talking heads. Some analysts framed Jasmine as reckless, gambling her career for the spotlight. Others praised her boldness, comparing her to truth-tellers of past eras. The split wasn't clean. It cut through parties, through demographics, even through household. In Detroit, a group of factory workers crowded around a break-room television. One of them, a man named Curtis, shook his head at the coverage. "Look, I don't care about the drama, but if the First Lady really leaned on the press to keep quiet, that's dirty. That's not what leadership is supposed to look like." His co-worker, a woman named Jeanette, responded, "I don't trust politicians, any of them. But that Crockett woman, she's got guts. Feels like she's talking for regular people." Public opinion was shifting. Pollsters reported a sharp divide. Supporters of Melania saw her as a mother unfairly attacked, while independents leaned toward Jasmine's call for transparency. For once, the usual lines weren't holding. In the Senate dining hall, whispers grew louder. Some lawmakers speculated that if Melania's office had indeed misused resources, it could trigger a broader investigation. Others rolled their eyes, insisting it was just political theater. But no one could ignore the fact that Jasmine had turned a private family matter into a public test of accountability. That evening, Jasmine appeared on Anderson Cooper 360. Calm and collected, she repeated her central message: "This isn't about me. It isn't about her. It's about whether Americans have the right to know when power is being used to silence truth. If we let that slide, then we've already surrendered our democracy." Cooper pressed her. "Do you worry you've crossed the line by naming the First Lady's office directly?" Jasmine smiled faintly. "The only line I crossed is the one that separates silence from courage." Clips of that exchange ran on TikTok within minutes, drawing millions of views overnight. The hashtag #ShareSilence or courage began trending globally. At the same time, Melania's inner circle debated their next step late into the night. Pacing with exhaustion told the group plainly, "She's winning the narrative. If we don't pivot, she defines us forever." Melania sat quietly, her hands clasped tightly. When she finally spoke, her words were icy. Then tomorrow I speak again. Not in videos, not with scripted words. Live, let her see me face to face. Everyone in the room exchanged wary glances. They knew what she meant. A public event, live cameras. No filter. If it worked, it could reclaim control. If it failed, it could be catastrophic. But as Melania applauded her boldest counter yet, Jasmine's allies were already preparing to push even harder, ensuring the fight would reach a climax Washington hadn't seen in years. The nation woke up to one of the most anticipated events in recent political memory. Melania Trump, First Lady of the United States, had announced she would address the controversy live. Not a pre-recorded video, not a carefully edited statement. Live cameras, unscripted, unfiltered. The announcement alone sent every network into overdrive. Cable hosts speculated. Pundits guessed at her tone and millions tuned in, waiting to see if she would finally silence the storm. At precisely noon, Melania walked onto a stage at the White House press room. Her posture was upright, her outfit simple but striking, and her eyes betrayed no hesitation. She stood at the podium, microphones bristling in front of her, and looked directly at the cameras. "I have heard the things being said," she began, her accent crisp, her delivery calm. "I have heard the accusations, the lies, the rumors, and I will say this. I am a mother before I am a first lady. I will not allow my family to be used as a weapon in political games." Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed in, she continued, her voice rising slightly. "Shame on those who twist the truth for their own ambition. Shame on those who think destroying families is the way to win. America deserves better." The statement was emotional, powerful, but it wasn't airtight. She offered no evidence to counter the claims of a cover-up. No denial of the phone calls Jasmine had exposed, just indignation framed in motherhood and morality. As the press conference ended, journalists shouted questions that went unanswered. Melania turned and walked away, her heels echoing across the marble floor. Supporters hailed her strength, critics called it evasion. But no one could deny it. The spectacle had seized the country's attention. That evening, Jasmine Crockett had made her counter-move. Sitting down with Rachel Maddow, she spoke calmly but with precision, wielding her words like a scalpel. "I respect motherhood. I respect motherhood. I respect families. But this is not about a son. This is about the abuse of influence. I showed call logs, transcripts, pressure campaigns. That's not rumor, that's evidence. And when leaders use their positions to silence the press, it's not just a family matter, it's a democracy matter." Maddow leaned in. "Congresswoman, do you believe the First Lady lied today?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "I believe she chose silence over truth, and history has always shown us. Silence protects no one, not even the powerful." Clips of that exchange became the night's top story on Twitter. For many it was no longer about the DNA results. It was about who had the courage to speak, and who tried to hide behind walls. In Springfield, Missouri, a retired teacher named Howard Grant told his local paper, "Look, I don't care who you vote for. This isn't about red or blue. This is about truth. If Crockett's right, then power is being abused. And if she's wrong, then why are they so afraid to prove it?" That kind of sentiment echoed nationwide. Trust was the casualty. Washington had been divided before. But this fight pulled Americans into a deeper question. What do leaders owe the people when secrets leak? By the week's end, congressional committees hinted at informal reviews of Melania's office's communications. Journalists refused to drop the trail, and Jasmine Crockett, once seen as a firebrand outsider, had positioned herself as a national voice for accountability. The clash wasn't clean, it wasn't fair. It was messy, emotional, and deeply human. A mother desperate to shield her child, a congresswoman determined to strip away secrecy. Two women caught in a storm, each playing for more than headlines, playing for legacy. In the end, the tale taught the nation a timeless lesson. The truth stands strong on its own, while lies always need protection. So, if you're listening to this and thinking about what it means for you, keep this in mind. When people stop questioning, power thrives in silence. What do you think about this situation? We want to hear your thoughts. Please share your opinion in the comments below. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Celebrity Stories. We're diving into the complexities they don't want discussed, and we're just getting started. God bless you, and God bless America. That day inside the East Wing, the walls seemed to hold their breath. Aides moved carefully, avoiding eye contact, waiting for the inevitable storm when the door to the First Lady's private office shut. The sound was sharp enough to make even a Secret Service agent look up. Everyone knew what was coming, but no one dared to predict how far it would go. Melania was seated behind a polished mahogany desk, a glass of water untouched at her side. The leaked DNA report lay in front of her, its pages slightly bent from being gripped too tightly. Her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from fury. She had spent years mastering the art of silence, keeping her emotions tucked neatly away from the public eye. But this was different. This was about Barron. I will not allow them to destroy my son, she snapped, her accent cutting through the tension like a knife. Do you understand? I don't care what it takes. Across from her, two advisors shifted uneasily. One, a political strategist named Raymond Hull, cleared his throat and tried to sound steady. First Lady, we can manage this. These things, rumors, leaks, they come and go. What matters is getting ahead of it before what? She shot back, slamming her hand down on the desk. The sound echoed in the room. Before every paper in the country, Prince lies about my family before my son becomes a target. Her voice cracked with a mix of rage and something else. Fear. The room fell quiet. Even Holly, who had handled crises for decades, didn't have an immediate answer. It wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about bloodlines, about identity, about something too sensitive to be explained away with spin. Melania stood suddenly, pushing her chair back with such force that it rattled against the wall. She began pacing, her heels striking the marble floor like a metronome of fury. I gave everything for this role, she muttered, more to herself than to her team. I protected, I stayed silent. I smiled when I wanted to scream. In this is how they repay me. One aide, a younger woman named Charlotte Winslow, dared to speak. Ma'am, we're not sure who leaked it, but if we can trace it back, find them. I don't care how. I don't care what you have to do. I want to know who betrayed me. The demand wasn't unreasonable for Washington, but the way she said it, low, sharp, and absolute, made everyone in the room stiffen. Charlotte scribbled a note, her hands shaking slightly before slipping out of the office to begin calls. That left Hull, who knew better than to push too hard when the First Lady was in this state. Still, his job was to advise, and he leaned forward carefully. We have options. We can discredit the report. We can call it fabricated, tie it to political enemies. Or we can delay, say nothing, and let it fade. Melania's laughter was bitter. Hollow fade. Nothing fades here. Everything becomes permanent. They will use this to destroy him, and to destroy me. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I will not let them. For a moment she looked almost fragile, eyes glassy, her hands gripping the back of the chair she had abandoned. But then she straightened, wiping away any trace of vulnerability. The mask was back. Prepare statements, she ordered, but no one breathes a word until I approve it. Not a single sentence leaves this office. Hull nodded. But he knew what Melania didn't. Secrecy never lasts in Washington. The harder you clamp down, the more others pry. And somewhere he suspected someone already had copies of the report. The outburst didn't end with words. Later that night, staffers described hearing the sound of glass shattering from the private residence. A vest may be thrown in a moment of rage. No one dared to ask. They just knew that the First Lady had crossed a line she rarely allowed herself to reach. Losing composure,